Now, I went into Vampire the Masquerade Swansong with low expectations, after the mechanically enjoyable but narratively forgettable Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood. Developed by Big Bad Wolf and published by Nacon, Swansong did its best to justify my cynical approach during the awkward opening hour, which keeps both the story and mechanical depths under wraps, frustrating rather than teaching you, and highlighting the weaker elements like the character models and twitchy controls. Thankfully, the more you play, the more Swansong expands in scope and proves itself a solid entry in the World of Darkness universe. For those that need a brief refresher, the Vampire the Masquerade games take place in a world where gothic horrors, think your vampires, werewolves, and mages, exist in the shadows alongside modern-day humanity. Vampire clans are the most closely integrated into human society, influencing politicians and businessmen while clashing amongst themselves, all desperate to obtain more power and a steady blood supply. To ensure their presence remains a secret, and to avoid the attention of brutal modern-day vampire hunters, the Camarilla Prince of each region strictly enforces the Masquerade, a highly organized and often ruthless campaign to avoid revealing vampiric powers, to limit the siring of unworthy humans, while still sating their unique hunger. Now, I don't want to delve too deeply into the story elements, as there are several major revelations within the first third of the game that, fittingly for the genre, could be missed entirely. The game opens as the three playable characters, Leisha, and Galeb, all vampires that have lived for a century or more, are summoned to the residence of the Prince of Boston. A code red has been sent from a party that was meant to celebrate a newly forged alliance between the Camarilla and the nearby Hertford Chantry blood mages, a move aimed at expanding and controlling the blood production in the region. With unverified reports of casualties and several key members of the court missing, the Prince initiates a lockdown. Unwilling to trust her primogens, a council meant to advise and limit her power, the three protagonists are dispatched to follow different leads, each best suited to their abilities, to uncover the true nature of the threat. Having started life as a tabletop role-playing game in 1991, the Vampire the Masquerade IP comes burdened with a ton of background lore and concepts that are used casually in dialogue. Similarly, the powerful vampires you control and interact with are often centuries old, with complex histories that explain their current abilities and personalities. Swansong deals with this by smartly working many concepts and themes into the plot, while also giving the protagonists, each with a temperament representative of their particular clan, ample opportunity for internal monologues. Somewhat less immersive is the staggering number of codex notifications that'll pop up as you play, and sequences where you're just exhausting lines of expository dialogue with no role-playing interaction. Still, those minor gripes aside, I'd argue Vampire the Masquerade Swansong is one of the best video game entry points, if you have a passing interest in the World of Darkness universe and want to expand your knowledge. When it comes to gameplay, Swansong is described as a narrative RPG, and if you've not experienced their prior game, The Council, it plays like a mix of Don't Nod's Life is Strange and Frogware's Sherlock Holmes games, just with an additional layer of underlying RPG mechanics that'll dictate your approach and success rate. There's no combat outside of a few scripted events, though there is one stealth sequence that's probably more frustrating than thrilling. Thankfully, most scenes place you in largest environments, some perhaps a little too large, with a checklist of tasks, multiple ways to achieve your objectives, and the ability to uncover optional information or encounters that can influence how future scenes play out. This will likely be a divisive design, but despite all the RPG elements and interconnected systems on offer, Swansong always offers a path forward without relying on any abilities. Similarly, many of the choices that affect future scenes or the epilogue are just binary player decisions that have no required skill checks. The longer I played, the more I realized this design is somewhat essential given the structure. Individual scenes, which you can tackle in any order during the major chapters, are all tailored towards each protagonist and their unique vampiric abilities. However, you still have full control of developing, and therefore potentially messing up, their attributes, dialogue and investigative skills, and their vampiric powers. Further complicating things, you can acquire temporary or permanent traits based on your dialogue preferences, and temporary resonances, good and bad, based on the victims you drink from. There's even a limited number of accessories to find and equip, which offer more situational bonuses with downsides, and there's incriminating documents to destroy to reduce your suspicion level in any location. As a result, Vampire the Masquerade Swansong is actually an incredibly complex experience, yet engaging with many of these mechanics is entirely optional. Experience points that you earn from success in prior scenes can be invested into dialogue skills like rhetoric or intimidation, essential for eking out more information or winning verbal confrontations, while investigation-oriented skills, such as technology and deduction, allow you to piece together events and track targets based on clues in the environment. Your vampiric skills are appropriately fantastical, and range from dominating your targets to your will, mimicking the appearance of others to gain access to restricted areas, and even short-range teleportation. However, balance is key, as using these abilities always comes with a cost. Skills consume a somewhat arbitrary willpower resource, restored by consuming equally arbitrary items, while your vampiric powers increase your hunger meter, that, in turn, can be restored by finding safe zones and luring select targets to feed on. You can also temporarily focus your skills and powers to improve percentages by consuming more willpower or increasing your hunger respectively, but so too can your targets, with the draw resolved by a classic dice roll. The interplay between dialogue and investigative mechanics generates an enjoyable flow in each scene, as you first explore looking for obvious clues, scout for safe rooms and potential prey, and then start weighing up the use of your abilities to get the information you need. Each scene ends with an overview highlighting your choices, alternative opportunities you may have missed, incentivizing replays, along with any failed objectives or any traits that you've gained. Perfectionists might find it frustrating that many optional objectives are tied to specific skills and powers that you can't master simultaneously, or several outcomes are mutually exclusive, and you'll need to keep an eye out for point-of-no-return interactions that might trigger the end of a scene before you're ready. However, once you accept you can't see every story beat in one go, and save-scumming dialogue checks is often fruitless, you're encouraged to focus on role-playing rather than optimizing. It's just a shame the linear tutorial-heavy opening does such a poor job of highlighting these strengths. Unfortunately, for a game that alternates between carefully examining your surroundings and face-to-face conversations, the presentation is a mixed bag, and feels distinctly last-gen throughout. The environments are often incredibly detailed, with great lighting, making the investigative parts a favourite of mine, especially when I realised the background detail was actually a clue, or sometimes when I managed to piece together events before my character voiced their thoughts. There's also a decent variety of locations on offer, with few encounters allowing for more fantastical settings. However, interaction prompts can be hard to spot, and I sometimes found myself wriggling around my character when trying to highlight the right one when they were clustered together. Dialogue interactions, however, fare far worse, especially when you're up close with dated character models and their exaggerated animations, with characters of colour suffering the most. Some of the voice work can also feel a little forced or unhinged, though it feels appropriate given the setting and the scenarios you find yourself in. The music feels understated throughout, but there are some great tracks. Just make sure to manually tweak the volume levels, as you can barely hear them by default. Now, few Vampire the Masquerade games will ever obtain the mostly deserved praise heaped upon Bloodlines, but despite a rough start, Vampire the Masquerade Swansong reveals an unexpected narrative and mechanical depth, making it a great fit for the IP. So long as you're not after an action-packed Bloodlines-style hybrid, and you're a fan of investigation-driven narratives with a focus on player choice and skill checks, Swansong should impress, despite a few flaws.